Gentlemen, and welcome to the 2023 First Selectman Debate here in the town of Brookfield. My name is PJ Prunty. I am the proud president and CEO of the Greater Danbury Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your schedules to join us here this evening. As some of you may be aware, the Brookfield Chamber and the Greater Danbury Chamber of Commerce came together as one chamber over the last year to continue the work of providing networking opportunities along with educational opportunities, and we are excited to have just had last week the Best of Brookfield at the Candlewood Inn. I'm seeing actually many faces from that event. Again, last week, we are of course looking forward to the gala coming up in March of 24, and are certainly excited to continue the tradition of hosting the First Selectman Debate here. So I want to thank both of our candidates here this evening for taking time out of certainly their busy schedule, so thank you very much for carving it out. We would like to give a shout out to our host venue for today. Brookfield High School appreciates their willingness and cooperation to lend what is a perfect venue for this evening. Before we head into the debate, I want to take a moment to thank our debate committee, Marie Mazeski, Linda Wagner, and Jackie Salem for all of your help in setting up the event and the planning. Really appreciate your hard work in continuing this tradition. Lastly, I want to thank our moderator for this evening, Mr. Scott Benjamin, for his continued support of this event held every 2 years. Appreciates your hard work in leading up to this event. We thank you, sir. So Scott will provide a brief overview of our format, but just a reminder that the only questions here this evening we pose from the moderator. We do appreciate you coming out tonight, but we will not be taking questions from the audience or from the public. So with that, I'd like to hand over the mic to our moderator for this evening, Scott.
Thanks. During the debate, no applause, please, until we get to the outro near the end of it, which will be roughly an hour from now. Our format: opening statements 5 minutes, round of questions. It'll be 2 minutes for a response, 1 minute for rebuttal. Closing statements will be 3 minutes. Mr. Dunn will have our first opening statement, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Scott. I'm proud to say I'm running for First Selectman. I was the First Selectman in Brookfield for 6 years, along with Sue Slater working with me. Sue did an incredible job. Unfortunately, Sue wanted to move on and do other things, become president of Alliance, so I lost her. And I've gotten somebody really, really good to replace Sue, Bob Belden. Bob Belden is a longtime Republican. He was in the Republican Party for 45 years. After the 2020 election, he made a determination that the Republican Party did not represent his values at that time. So Bob is now unaffiliated. And I say that because we care, our team cares about doing what's right for Brookfield. We are not taking a strictly partisan view. We have unaffiliated people running with us, and we're happy to have them run with us, whether their previous affiliation was Republican or not. Because what we want are the best people for Brookfield. People who will come in, serve on commissions, serve on boards, and do what's right for Brookfield, not for some national goal that they have. Because Brookfield is an incredibly good town. It's full of incredibly good people. And we want to do what one of our members said is good people doing good things for a good town. And that's the slate we put together. When I first ran for First Selectman 8 years ago, Brookfield was in a lot of trouble, right? And so I became First Selectman. Within 5 days of becoming First Selectman, I found out we were missing $3.3 million of our $5 million general fund. That is a huge blow to any town. We fixed that. We built up our reserves. We did get a downgrade from the rating agencies, which is critical when you go to borrow. We turned that around, and the rating agencies increased our rating to AAA with no negative outlook. And that allowed us to borrow for the new school. If you remember, we went through 3 years of having town meetings and discussing the Candlewood Lake Elementary School and what it would mean to the town, and for a lot of residents, what it would cost. We had to borrow $63 million to build that school. Our plan that we sent out to residents called for an interest rate of between 4 and 4.5% to borrow the money for that school. Because we did such a good job managing the finances of the town, we were able to keep that AAA rating, and we borrowed for that school at an average of 2.68%, less, almost half of what we had planned. That allowed us to save, by conservative estimates, over $30 million in interest costs, because we ran the town diligently, with care, and conservatively. I have worked, and I did this with the Board of Ed, and if you remember, when I first took office 8 years ago, the Board of Finance was not talking to the Board of Ed at all. When budgets came, the Board of Finance was just making decisions without talking to the Board of Ed. In conjunction with the Board of Finance and the Board of Ed, we got all of 3 boards working together, especially in budget season. We got them talking to each other. We got them understanding the needs of each other. And we came up with budgets that were incredibly good and incredibly well managed. A lot of that thanks goes to the Board of Finance. We have members on our Board of Finance right now that really care about Brookfield, that do their homework, that are smart as hell, and they've done a great job. And I work very, very well with the Board of Finance, even when it was in control of the opposing party, because that's what we're here for in Brookfield. Work together. You cannot run a town on a partisan basis. 60%, if you're a Democrat or a Republican, 60% of the town is not a member of your party. You have to work for the entire town, for the unaffiliated, for the Ds and for the Rs. You have to do what's best for the town. And when we put people on boards, those people get on those boards and they immediately become residents on the board. Not a D, not an R. They do what's best for the town. Now, we've had 3 circumstances, 3 instances in the last 2 years where Democrats on boards have been replaced by Republicans. That's never happened before. But the current Board of Selectmen, which is run by Ms. Carr, made a decision to take these off the boards and replace them with ours because they could. I'm sorry, that's wrong. We need different voices. We need different opinions on boards. We do not want all of one party running every single board. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Carr, 5 minutes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First of all and foremost, thank you so much to the Chamber for putting this event together, and of course to you, Mr. Benjamin. I know you've been after this for since 2011, so thank you so much. And thank you to my opponent, Steve, for agreeing to this event. I look forward to healthy debate tonight. Good evening, residents. For those of you here tonight, it looks like we have a large crowd. And for those of you viewing from home, thank you so much for taking time out to hear what we both have to say. I was virtually an unknown about 2 years ago when I decided to run for office, but my roots do run very deep in town, and I'd like to point to the fact that I've shared my complete bio and the multitude of everything I've done throughout my life on my Brookfield First Select Woman Facebook page, so I'd really encourage you to take a look at my life's work. I'm curious to see my opponent's resume and what he's done with his life. I am not a politician by any stretch of the means. I have very fresh perspectives. I bring a very different outlook. I moved home to the town that I've loved and that I've been away from, serving on active duty in the Army for 25 years. And I was saddened with what I had to see when I moved home, quite frankly. I think this evening is a perfect example of that. It seems that the folks over here are here for the bride, and the folks over there are here for the groom. And these are our neighbors, our friends, the people we work with, the people we raise our children with. I think that it's unfortunate to see this climate where we're almost pitted against one another, and it just really breaks my heart. But I just want to say that having been in the seat of First Selectwoman for the past 2 years now, almost 2 years, it's been amazing working with our residents, and we've got incredible people in this town. You all sitting here tonight know that. I would just ask that we do find a way to come together. Our common denominator is our love of Brookfield. That's why I moved back upon my retirement from the Army, and instead of talking to you about my experience, because 2 years ago Mr. Dunn argued that I have no experience, I just want to talk about the things that I've been able to accomplish in a 22-month period, and there's 4 salient points, one of which is the safety and security of our residents. I learned very quickly that our town-wide communication system was in need of a desperate need of an upgrade. We were operating off of a system from 1986, so I worked very closely with our police officers, our first responders, our public works, our school officials to get that done. We were quick to bring it into the budget process. The Board of Finance supported it, thank you very much, and the residents voted for it. So we're in the middle of implementing that new system today. Steve Dunn had 6 years to accomplish this, but to no avail. The second point is our educational environment. I quickly learned from the superintendent of schools that not all of our schools had school security. In fact, Mr. Belden did not even have a school security task force. How disappointing. Being so geographically close to Sandy Hook, you would think that the safety of our kids would be at the forefront of our chief elected official's mind over a 6-year period. I do not know, it just baffles me that our school security task force had to be reinstated, that it was dismantled while Steve Dunn and his running mate were in office. Again, Steve Dunn had 6 years to accomplish this, to no avail. Let's talk about development for a quick second. Mr. Dunn, when he addressed development, first of all, if I was here 8 years ago, I would not have gone about the town center district in the way that Mr. Dunn did. When we talk about development, you can either look at areas that you're able to develop or areas that you're able to protect. And I'm very proud to say that I was able to facilitate preserving 45 acres at the Ledges Reserve in perpetuity. And then finally, town hall operations. Under the Dunn administration, you may not be aware, but town hall has been running on fumes. And over the last 22 months, I had to hire a full-time health director, which how could we not have a full-time health director during a public health crisis? No sanitarian, no additional help in our building department and our IT offices, which have been inundated through COVID and afterwards. Ladies and gentlemen, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's still so much work to do. The damage has been Steve Dunn. It is time for Tara Carr and Joe Radini to continue with working towards a better Brookfield. Thank you.
What would your vision be for the future of police facilities? Mrs. Carr, 2 minutes.
So the police department has been in question for a few years now. My understanding is that the previous police chief, and oh, by the way, I hired a new police chief when I first entered office, they look toward a renovation or a new build. And there are plans for both of those. I've charged the current chief of police to update those prices because, as we all know, with inflation over the past several years, prices have just gone through the roof. So it's time to reevaluate how much that would cost the town. I have personally toured the facility. I would agree that there's some areas that do need to be addressed, such as the locker rooms, especially the female locker room. We're working on our arms room as we've just been able to procure new weapons. So there's definitely some things that we need. A parking garage would be amazing. The jail cells need updating. I mean, I could go on, but there's no denying that there's some areas that need very close attention. Thank you.
Mr. Dunn, 2 minutes.
Yes, we have been working on a police station with the prior police chief, Jay Purcell. He came up with 3 specific plans and designs, and we have been working on those. Those have come before the Office of the First Selectman. I've shared them with some other people. Our primary goal when talking to them is to meet the needs of the Police Accountability Act, which was passed a few years ago. That act requires towns to upgrade their facilities. For example, I think we have 4 cells to hold people. We don't hold very many people at all, maybe 1 or 2 a year, but the new law requires that you cannot have a 16-year-old next to a 24-year-old. You cannot have a female next to a male. So we are going to have to address the police station. Ms. Carr, when she ran last time, said the police station was going to be the #1 priority for her. Nothing has happened yet. We have to move forward on a police station. We have no choice. The law is requiring us, so there are a couple options. We can expand the existing police station, Or the police have come up with a design to put the police station where the farmer's market is. I know I'm gonna hear groans about the farmer's market, but we do want the police station to be centrally located. And again, as we did with the new Candlewood Lake Elementary School, we should have town meetings, we should get everyone involved. What do you want to see? What do you need? Let's move forward, come up with the design, come up with the cost, and then move forward. Thank you.
Mrs. Carr, 1 minute.
Well, all that would be very nice if we could afford it. So we are, for those of you who do not know, in the middle of what's called the debt bubble. The Board of Finance did a great job of articulating what that means several months ago when we were working through the budget, and the library question came up. The debt bubble was explained thoroughly, and that's on a YouTube video of their meeting from many months ago. But we can't do anything in Brookfield until we are able to afford it. And Mr. Dunn, thanks to you, I've saddled that debt, and we have to just be patient and steadfast in making the right decisions. We can't just jump in and build a police department. We need to do the analysis and the work that's involved in order to know what it is we're doing. Unlike the new school, where many, many bad decisions were made. Thank you.
Mr. Dunn, 1 minute.
Yes, I keep on hearing from the other side that we're loaded with debt. That is not true. We went to the town. We had 14, I believe, town meetings and talked to people. We did borrow $63 million to build a new school, which I'm happy to say is comfortably under budget right now. It's a beautiful school. If you've not been there, you can arrange for a tour. It is going to be the finest elementary school in the state of Connecticut, if not New England or the United States. This is a good thing. But we do have the opportunity to build new facilities. We came up, and I started it, a 10-year capital planning committee and a 10-year capital plan to look at all of these big costs that are coming down the road, a police station, a library, other facilities. We have a plan to do that. In 2 years, all of the debt from the high school is going off of our books. That frees up over $1 million a year in debt. We will be able to do the things we want and at a reasonable cost to the residents. Thank you.
What should be done with Center Elementary School? Mr. Dunn, 2 minutes.
I just sat down. The Center Elementary School, it is near and dear to many, many people. It was the single oldest, still operating wood school building in Connecticut. There's a lot of sentimental value invested in that school. My children went to that school. I'm sure a lot of people in this room's children went to that school. I do not, as Ms. Carr has suggested, want to tear it down. The value of that building is $6 million. Half of the building is very, very old, and half is reasonably new with steel beam construction. I think what we should do with the center school is, again, reformulate the Center Elementary School Committee. I would love to see the library expand there. I would love to see community groups go in there, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts. Let's make the Parks and Rec, let them use some of the facilities. We now have a building that's sitting empty, and we don't need it to be empty. There is plenty of things. I can't tell you how many times when I was first selectman, people would come to us and say, I need a meeting room, and we did not have them. It was very frustrating. We can turn Center Elementary School into a community center that meets the needs of a lot of people in town, and that's what I would propose we do. Thank you.
Mrs. Carr, 2 minutes.
Yeah, so as I've always said, I am definitely a proponent of repurposing Center Elementary School to be a community center and/or / library. However, back to my previous statement about the police department, we just don't have the money right now. Unfortunately, and baffling as well, when the new school was decided upon, there was no foresight to determine what was going to happen with Center School. I cannot tell you how many times I have talked to the program manager over at the new school development about how we could have had 2 really nice facilities for the price of the one in the new school. Why didn't part of the effort for the planning of the new school, some energy get put behind what the plan was going to be for Center School? The superintendent literally brought me the key last week and said, here you go. Meanwhile, the oil tank is 6 years beyond its useful life. We've had to drain the oil. The tank will be coming out on the 19th. And the water tank is right behind that. Because we have no oil, we have to turn the heat off. You know, I understand the sentimental value, but Huckleberry was demoed. Why don't we plan to build something that looks like Center School if that is where everybody's heart is, when we can afford to do so? Thank you very much.
Mr. Dunn, 1 minute.
No further.
Mrs. Carr, 1 minute.
Yeah, continuing on the Center Elementary School theme, because it is important, and I appreciate that, and I respect everybody's opinions. I heard Mr. Dunn say that I want to tear it down. That is not the case. That is just an idea. And I am not so close-minded as to not consider all options. I think we need to do the analysis on every facet of what it is we want as a town, a community, what you all want as the voters, and move toward that end. We're not here to entertain special interests. Nobody can just go over there and stake their flag and say, this is ours. And to build a $30 million library is just absurd when we have other needs as well. So how do we find that healthy balance? That is the question.
What should be done regarding possible sewer service in Candlewood Shores? Mrs. Carr, 2 minutes.
Again, I was baffled to hear that Mr. Dunn wants to pursue the project with federal funding. Does anybody know how much that's going to cost? $85 million plus. You think the federal government's going to give Brookfield, Connecticut $85 million to do that? That is to say, we have somewhere to send the flow once it's all connected. That is to say, the residents want it. It's just, it's incredible. I am not a proponent of that project. I think that it would be insane to pursue it. We are just not at that juncture. And the study that the WPCA has been after for several years just came back last week and solidified the fact that the lake is not contaminated. And the fine work of the Candlewood Lake Authority and others have substantiated the same. So at this juncture, it will not happen on my watch. Thank you.
Mr. Dunn, 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you. We, Bob Eldon and I have discussed this with a number of people, including the WPCA. We are against placing sewers in the Shores area at this point in time. The cost is too prohibitive. There's not enough information. We need to make sure we know what we're doing if we ever go ahead and put in sewers. Then, if and when, 10 or 12 years from now, we decide as a town, with a vote, that we do want sewers, it'll be up to the residents to vote. And I think we don't even put it before the residents unless we get a massive amount of funding for it from the feds and from the state. Because you have to remember, Candlewood Lake is not only an asset to the residents on the lake or near the lake, it's an asset and a gem in the city of Brookfield, and it's also a state asset, and it's a national asset. And I think if we work really hard, we could get grants to pay for sewers. But at this point in time, we are against sewers in the Shores area. Thank you.
Mrs. Carr, 1 minute.
I don't know how you can say that, Steve, when you were just quoted in the newspaper as saying you would pursue the project again with the funding. So what is it you're saying? Nobody knows, because the way you do business is on a kiss and a promise, a wink and a handshake. You're part of the Good Old Boys Network that operates, you know, behind the curtain. And it's just every day I'm asking myself, what did he do here for the last 6 years? Well, now I know how you've operated, and it's been part of the Good Old Boys Network. That's not what you're going to get from Joe Rondini and I. We're true to our word. We stand up for what we believe in, and we do not believe that the Candlewood Shores Peninsula should be sewered at this time. Again, we do not have the capacity to send it to Danbury. Thank you very much, Mr. Dunn. Where's that contract? How come that capacity was decreased while you were in office? It's a mystery to everybody.
Mr. Dunn, 1 minute.
Here's where we have a lack of understanding about how things work. The town of Brookfield has no control over how much waste goes to Danbury. The town of Brookfield has no control over how much capacity Danbury gives the town of Brookfield. The WPCA is in charge of that, fully. The only thing the town does for the WPCA is provide funding when they need to borrow money. Now, do we work with the WPCA? Yes. Do we talk to them? Yes. Do we try to understand what their needs are and what they're doing? Yes. But we cannot tell the WPCA what to do. And I think it is a misnomer to simply say that Steve Dunn is this or that. You just said that I hid behind the doors and I've done nothing. Look at the Four Corners. We got 5 streetscape projects funded, 4 of them at over 90% to rebuild our downtown. We managed the macro burst. We managed through COVID and vaccinated 9,000 people. Don't say that we did nothing during our administration. It's just not true.
Should housing be limited in the future in Brookfield Town Center? Mr. Dunn, 2 minutes.
When I first took office, we had a guy come into town, and if everybody knows where the Kids Kingdom is in the downtown, in the Four Corners area, the child care place, he came in and he was going to build a 7-story building in Brookfield. And he could do it because he was using a law called 830G. And 830G is a state law that allows any developer to go into any town and build any project they want as long as 20% of it is affordable. And he was going to make 20% of the apartments in that 7-story building affordable. I stopped him. I called him in. I said to him, Tom, if you try to build this building, I'm going to sue you. You're going to spend $1 million to $2 million in legal fees. The town is going to spend $1 million to $2 million in legal fees. We will hold up your project for 8 years. You have a choice. You can build your project in 8 years, or you can give us a 3-story building today. Guess what? 5 minutes later, he gave us a 3-story building. And that's what the design is, and that's what the build is going to be. So once he had held us up and over the barrel there, I said, this is a monstrous nightmare. And guess what I did? We went out and we got a moratorium on all affordable housing. All. Without the consent of the town. We were one of 5 towns in the state of Connecticut to get that moratorium. And guess what? We renewed it. We're the only town in Connecticut that has renewed the moratorium, which returns the control of development in our town to the town and not the state. Thank you.
Mrs. Carr, 2 minutes.
Look, I mentioned earlier that if I were here 8 years ago, I would not have pursued the development of Brookfield Town Center District in the way that it's unraveled. We do have the plan of conservation and development from 2016, which will be coming up for renewal every 10 years. So the vision was set, and then it's obviously been worked upon. But I do want to tell you something about Mr. Dunn talking about 3-story house, because he's a proponent, and he actually has campaigned for and made phone calls, donated money, time to support people like Eva Zimmerman and others in his party who are part of the Working Families Party, and they are proponents of defunding the police. Just this weekend, he had Luke Bronin here in Brookfield, the mayor of Hartford, down knocking on doors with him. And Luke Bronin, if you don't know, is the largest advocate in the state of Connecticut for statewide zoning. So, before we know it, if you vote for Steve Dunn, we could have 6-story buildings and apartments in your very own backyard, because that's what his party does. They want to defund the police and build 6-story apartments right here in Brookfield.
Mr. Dunn, 1 minute.
Again, I am astounded by the lack of knowledge. Luke Bronin did come here Saturday. He did not knock on doors with us. He wanted to visit with Democrats in town. And my guess is he wants to run for further office. We invited him just like we invite anyone to come and visit with us. I am not in favor of statewide zoning. And to continue to say these things that are just simply not true is a disservice to the residents of Brookfield. It is. Be honest. Be straightforward. If you want to complain about me, okay, I'm a big boy, I can take it. I'm only 5'8". All right, you can say that in a derogatory manner, but let's talk about facts, not fiction, not working. I don't even know who Eva, whoever it is you're talking about, is. I've never donated to her. I have donated to local candidates. I believe in supporting our democratic system. Thank you.
Mrs. Carr, 1 minute.
Your party is an advocate in the state of Connecticut for defunding the police, Steve. Are you in favor of defunding the police?
I'm sorry. Can you answer?
No.
And for you to not know who Eva Zimmerman is, she was running for state, I want to say state rep, but state senator.
No, she ran for state senator.
That's right, 30th district. Thank you very much. And if you find something comical, just continue to laugh. That's respectful. But back to the Four Corners area and development. You know, it just was very convenient that all of a sudden the capacity flow to Danbury was decreased to curb that development, Steve. From what I understand, you've set the path for many developments to come. So when that capacity is restored, it is within the right of these developers to go ahead and build. And that happened on your time.
Do salaries need to be increased for the municipal department heads? Mrs. Carr, 2 minutes.
If you ask the Board of Finance, they would say absolutely not. I think that we should be compensating our town employees who work very hard for the town, and if anybody's watching, thank you so much. You guys work so hard day in and day out, and you do great work for the residents. The times have changed. We're not in 1980 anymore, and there's so many things across Town Hall that haven't been updated, such as policies and bylaws, and how can you run a town and not take a look at what the letter of the law says beyond the charter? It's mind-boggling that policies haven't been updated and nothing's been touched while Steve Dunn was in office, that's for sure. But yes, we've had people leave for higher paying salaries. There's a shortage of these skill sets across the state of Connecticut. In fact, our land use director was one of the first to have left for a higher paying job in Richfield, and Steve Dunn actually asked me to give that individual a $15,000 raise before I was even in the door.
Mr. Dunn, 2 minutes.
That is truthful. I did ask. We had a land use director who was incredibly talented. We wanted to keep her. And I think if I had stayed in office, we would have been able to give her a raise of $15,000, and she would have stayed, rather than the $40,000 raise she got when she moved to Ridgefield, because she loves Brookfield and she was doing a really good job. And I could have worked with the Board of Finance to have a discussion to make them understand why we needed this one particular person. During my administration, we lost 6 people in 6 years. Ms. Carr has lost 50% of her management staff in less than 2 years. It is not only about salaries. It's the work environment that you create. People do not leave jobs just for money. What they do want is an environment where they can be rewarded, appreciated, cared for, and know that their job is valued. And that's what I did during my administration. We have good people in the town. We have good workers in the town. They are incredible. And we need to continue to do that. That's not to say that we're not going to have to give people raises. We are. We are. Right now, 70% of our employees are union. They are under a fixed contract, and they make between 3 and 3.25% raises each year. Inflation has far outstripped that over the last 2 years. So I imagine when they come to negotiate in the next 2 years, it's going to be a difficult conversation. But you look at people on an individual basis and you give them raises based on their skill sets, based on their ability to do the job, and then you work closely with the Board of Finance to say, guys on the Board of Finance, here's my problem. Here's what I need to do. I want to keep this person. I want to give them a raise. And I think if you can work with the Board of Finance, which Ms. Carr has proven she cannot do, right, you can get things done. Because right now, the First Selectman's Office and the Board of Finance are not speaking to each other and haven't been for months. That's the wrong way to run a town. You've got to work together. Thank you.
Mrs. Carr, 1 minute.
And going back to whether or not we should increase the salary of our employees, which was the question, you know, I brought up the issue of potentially doing a salary survey because we need to do that analysis to determine what it is. We can't just go to the wind and say, oh, Steve Dunn, I think I need to give myself a salary increase, because that is what happened. The Board of Finance approved the salary increase for your former first selectman. I would never ask the town for anything, not a single penny. And when we talk about civility and treating our employees well, on your watch, Mr. Dunn, the chair of the Board of Finance verbally assaulted an employee in town hall. That is absurd. So, you want to talk about treating employees well? I treat every single person I encounter with dignity and respect that they deserve. I never falter. And I've never been approached that I haven't created a good work environment. Thank you.
Mr. Dunn, 1 minute.
It is true that the Board of Finance chairman did get upset in town hall. I called him in, we had a discussion, I admonished him. He actually apologized to the employees. He made a mistake, there's no doubt about it, right? I talked to the employees, I said, do you want to bring a complaint before the Board of Ethics? I will support you if you want to do that. It had not, none of the employees involved wanted to bring it to the Board of Ethics or take it any further. We gave them the opportunity, they said no. And Mr. Rooney, who was the chairman, let's talk about this, right? Apologized. He made a mistake. He's done an excellent job as the chairman of the Board of Finance. We all make mistakes. He handled it, we handled it together, we discussed this. This was over, what, 3.5 years ago? And yet now, we're bringing it up again, right? We constantly bring things up from the past, which is fine, but when you're gonna do that, make sure it's accurate and you're honest and you're truthful about it. Thank you.
What will you do to maintain the town's bond rating? Mr. Dunn, 2 minutes.
I'm sorry, Lou?
The bond rating.
Yeah, I think we need to do what we've done in the past. When I first met with the bond rating agencies, they were very, very unhappy with the town because we lost 80% of our general fund. And that general fund is your rainy day fund. If you have an emergency, if a truck, a $300,000 truck blows up, right, you need to replace it immediately. You need to have that reserve, that capacity to be able to take any blows. A perfect example of that is a macro burst, right? We had a macro burst come through town. We managed it. We were spending a ton of money just getting the roads cleared, right? We got that money back from FEMA. In the future, we got over $4 million back from FEMA, but we needed the money right then on the spot to do this work, and that's what we did. So you have to come up with a plan for the rating agencies, and this is what I did in my career for 35 years. You have to make the rating agencies understand that you have the capacity to withstand anything that might come up. And in doing that, we've raised our general fund from a 1.9% when I took office of our general fund, of our funding, to over 15%. That allows the town to have incredible resiliency and to be able to do things. And I'll give you a perfect example. We used to have to borrow every single year to pay for capital projects and then bond those projects every 3 or 4 years. We no longer borrow for those. We use our own money to pay for them. It saves hundreds of thousands of dollars in short-term financing costs. Thank you.
Mrs. Carr, 2 minutes.
So finally, we hear a little bit about your background, Mr. Dunn. You're a finance guru. That's interesting. If that were the case, why are we paying a finance director $178,000 a year? Plus, we have our Board of Finance and Bond Counsel. So to your question, Mr. Benjamin, the advice I've been given recently is that potentially we take a pause in bonding because of the debt that we're in, and I happen to agree that that is a prudent thing to do. No further comment.
Mr. Dunn, 1 minute.
It is true we have debt. It is true that we should take our time in adding any new debt. That was part of the 10-year capital plan that we put together, that if you're updating every year, right now we have a capital planning commission, a committee. We need to make that permanent. They do a 10-year capital plan. And again, the goal was, we build a new school, we look at our financing. The debt from the high school is going to be rolling off in 2 years. That frees up room in our debt schedule to take on new projects. We have to start that process, have the town meetings. Is it a police station? I think that's the most important thing we have to look at right now. We have to move forward, and we can do these projects. Remember, when we built the school, we went out to the residents and we said, over the 20-year bonding life of the school, the average resident, the average house will pay $357 more per year for the new school. It is much less than that now since the financing is lower. And the residents agreed 64% to 36% that we wanted to build that school, and we did. So it's going to cost on average less than $357.
I think you're out of time.
Thank you. So
Mrs.
we
Carr,
can
1
get
minute.
this done.
Yeah, again, to a previous comment I made about the new school, look, it is phenomenal. It is, I mean, I've heard nothing but good things about it. Have we had our challenges? Yes. Is there still work to be done? Yes. But again, that new school was a tremendous amount of money, and I've been told time and time again that we could have had 2 very nice facilities for the price of that one. And you got very lucky, Steve. You really did. It's amazing that the interest rates were as good as they were when they were. If we were to venture into the same kind of pursuit today, we'd be paying, you know, what, 7% more? It's been a 40%, over 40-year high inflation. So we've had unprecedented cost increases with contractual issues and fuel, you name it, we've faced it, and I've done a pretty good job at keeping 2 budgets pretty stable, considering that what we've had to face over the last 2 years.
What do you see as the future size of tax increases in the municipal government? Mrs. Carr, 2 minutes.
I mean, look, nobody in this room or watching at home, and none of our residents want to see a tax increase, but for the reason, and the goal is to keep things flat. Unfortunately, in the environment we're in, it's difficult to do that. So, like I've said in 2 years of my letters for the budget, the address I've made to the townspeople, we've got to just tighten our belts and be a little bit more fiscally responsible. Again, we can't go out to bond right now, and I agree with Steve that the Capital Committee is a good thing to keep intact, as well as continuing to work on the 10-year model.
Mr. Dunn, 2 minutes.
Yeah, when we look at the increases in taxes during my administration, and I've got a little data here, but I need glasses now. During my administration, the average increase in the budgets for the town was 3.6%. Under Ms. Carr, the average increase is 5.1% per year. There are extenuating circumstances there. We have to remember that 70% of our budget is salaries, and of that, 80% of our employees are union. We have to give them raises every year. We do. So Ms. Carr, when she ran last time, promised 0% tax increases. You can't do that. You cannot run a town with a 0% tax increase. I'm sorry, you can't. 70% of the fixed costs are fixed and are going to go up. And I've always been honest about that. We are going to have tax increases in the future. But you need people who know finance, like Bob Belden and I, to be able to keep them at the lowest possible level. We've done a good job during the 6 years I was first selectman. We showed the town with the schools what it would cost. We will do the same thing when it comes to a police station, so people can make informed decisions about their tax rates. And that's what we should do. Thank you.
Mrs. Carr, 1 minute.
So from 2016 to 17, under the Dunn administration, there was a 4.7% increase. From 17 to 18, there was a 2.3% increase. From 18 to 19, a 3.4% increase. From 19 to 20, a 4.7% increase. And from 20 to 21, 2.2% increase. I came into office, again, faced with everything I mentioned previously, and straddled with the debt. We're now paying on that debt, principal on the debt. So my first year we were at a 3.15% increase, and this year it was a 3.79% increase, where I actually tried to reduce the budget, and the Board of Finance put the money right back in for the Board of Ed. The budget failed the first time. But again, I delivered 2 budgets below the CPI during a period of record inflation, and Steve Dunn couldn't do that in his 6-year period. So while I was dealing with 3 times the amount of inflation than Steve had, he still couldn't get the job done. Thank you, Mr. Biden.
Mr. Dunn, 1 minute.
Yeah, you know, if you look at the numbers, I've got them here, you can look at it, the increases per year. We are going to have increases every year. We just are. What we have to do, when someone tries to balance their budget and lower the overall cost by proposing a $500,000 cut in the school budget, that's a problem for me. It's a real problem for me. And I asked Ms. Carr when we were discussing it at the Board of Selectmen, why are you cutting $500,000 from the school budget? And at first I didn't get an answer, and then the answer I got was, well, we're not having the Center Elementary School expenses anymore, so I'm taking that out of the school budget. And I said, you know what, if you looked at the school budget, they've already taken that out. It was $67,000 in heating and electric. The school board had already taken that out. So again, why are you cutting $500,000 from the school budget? I don't have an answer yet. She just cut $500,000, and we put it back. Our schools are important. We must support our schools. The schools have a really good budget. They have a tight budget, a careful budget, and we support that budget. Thank you.
Should Brookfield continue its Board of Selectmen form of government? Mr. Dunn, 2 minutes.
You know, we looked at this a few times in town. Yes, the Board of Selectmen with 3 people it works. It's, I think, a good, viable way to run a town. If I had my personal druthers, I'd have 5 people on the Board of Selectmen. The more heads you get in there, the more discussion you have, the better. There has been twice in town, if I remember correctly, the town has voted on hiring a town manager. That has been voted down twice. I'm against that. I think we can do it with a first selectman or first select woman who's competent, who knows finance, HR, has managed people, all of those things. And I have done that. You know, Ms. Carr has questioned my career. Let me do that quickly. I spent 35 years in banking. I ended up as a group executive for JP Morgan's investment bank in the investor services group. I managed about $2 trillion in assets for clients. My single largest client held $1.3 trillion in assets. So I know financing, I know bank management. I was in charge of client service for that, sales, marketing, and relationship management. I had over 700 people who worked for me who did all of those things, and they were located all over the United States. That's my background. I have those skill sets, and that's what we need now between Bob and I and his experience as a vice president of IBM. He's done an incredible job as the Board of Finance chair and as the chair of the Board of Ed, because Bob listens to people. Bob does not make decisions based on party politics. He looks at it, he listens to people and says, what is the best thing for Brookfield? And I do the same thing, and I hope you'll continue to support us. Thank you.
Mrs. Carr, 2 minutes.
Bob Belden and Steve Dunn are entrenched political lackeys. It is time for new energy, and that is what Joe Rondini and I will bring. We are not politicians. We actually have children in the school system. We understand what families are facing today. Joe and his wife are detectives in Greenwich, and they are huge, obviously, proponents of the police. Steve Dunn talked about being a financial manager, and if you are elected in November, Steve, I would be a huge advocate of getting rid of our town controller if that's the case and you're so good at what it is that you do. I have a master's degree in human relations, and one of the things I can say where you have failed, back to the salary study and compensating our town hall employees appropriately, is investing in human capital, which is a huge deficit in our budget. and is something that we should seriously consider. And just as we're building reserves for all of our capital projects and other areas, we should also be addressing human capital investment in order to make Brookfield better for the future and to keep it running as a well-oiled machine for future generations.
Mr. Dunn, 1 minute.
I agree with you. You know, I have an MBA in finance, and one of the things you're taught when you get an MBA, or even in business, that human resources are the most important, single important resource you have. They are the ones that make the machine work. And I would argue that Ms. Carr, with her misplaced salary survey, although you say you want to get these things done, you haven't gotten it done. You were given in the budget the funding to do a salary survey, and it turned into a debacle. It turned into a mess. And the Board of Finance wouldn't accept what you were giving them, which was a CCM report of salaries in different towns. That is not the way you do a salary survey. You have to look at people's salaries, what their job descriptions are, how much vacation do they get, how much pension do they get, what kind of benefits do they get. You have to look at the whole package. And I agree, we need to look at all of the salaries in town. I agree. We want people to be paid effectively and properly. Thank you.
Mrs. Carr, 1 minute.
So at our last Board of Selectmen meeting, Stephen, we gave you a stack of job descriptions. Have you had a chance to look through those yet? You know, I would venture to say you probably haven't. You've missed all but maybe 2 or 3 coffees with the community over the last 2 years. That just goes to show how much you really care about Brookfield. You don't even show up for the residents. Not to mention the fact that you've been late to meetings time and time again, and you've thrown hissy fits at some of the meetings, which are on record. You know, in regards to my relationship with the Board of Finance, they've told me that you used to have pizza parties, and I would hope that that wasn't on taxpayers' dime. You know, maybe I don't have that relationship with the chair of the Board of Finance, but it's not to say that we shouldn't be working together. It's all that I've ever advocated for, and if people have a personal problem with me, it's never been brought to my face.
Closing statements, Mrs. Carr, 3 minutes.
Yeah, so I started off by telling you some of the things that I've been able to accomplish over the last 22 months. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There's still so much work to do. I do love this town. I am proud to be raising my 4 children here. I moved my husband here from Hawaii, for God's sake, so that says something. It is a great town. We do have great schools. I just wish, again, that people would be a little bit more compassionate towards one another. I think it's time to come around. We're beyond COVID. You praise yourself for doing a good job through COVID, Steve. All I ever heard after moving home in January of 2020 and then COVID came out was you and the chair of the Board of Ed telling parents to sit down and shut up. And that's not what our parents deserve. So if what you want is the good old boys network, people who operate on a handshake and a wink, Steve Dunn and Bob Belden are your guys. If you want someone who's going to try to get himself a pension in the 11th hour, walking out of town hall when he should have been serving the people in his last month of tenure, Steve Dunn is your man. If you want people who are going to just sit back and do nothing because it's easier to do that, again, what accomplishments has he had aside from the new school, which again has its faults? Could we have done that differently? Absolutely. If you want that kind of person, vote for Steve Dunn, vote for my opponent. But with Tara Carr and Joe Rondini at the helm, you get hardworking individuals who will stop at nothing to lead with compassion, integrity, and listen to people if they bring things my way. Or, you know, if you see me in passing, don't be afraid to say something. Everybody always has so much to say on social media, but never once has anybody come to me to say what their concerns are. I will say that I try to be very civil, and I think the chair of your Democratic Town Committee would agree. He approached the podium at a meeting and was very nervous, I should say, and I encouraged him to continue to say what he had to say, and the next day he actually thanked me for that in an email. So thank you very much, Aaron. That meant a lot. There's a lot more that I could say. With me, what you see is what you get. I wear my life on my sleeve. I fall asleep thinking about this town. I wake up thinking about this town. I work hard for this town day in and day out. Again, I want to continue to serve the people of Brookfield. It's been an honor and a privilege over the last 22 months, and if I'm blessed to be reelected, I will continue to work even harder. God bless Brookfield. God bless America. Thank you all so much.
Mr. John Fernandez.
Thank you, Scott. Again, we're running into a case here. Ms. Carr brought up the pension issue. Now, she knows this because she's seen it, right? I tried to effect a change to the pension. I worked on it for 6 years. The Board of Ethics looked at this. Instead of going to the Board of Ethics, she had a complaint. What she did is she had hired a tack dog attorney from the town attorney's office, right, to basically build a smear campaign against me. But then it did go before the Board of Ethics. And you know what? Board of Ethics said, Steve Dunn did nothing wrong. He did his job. So stop trying to smear people. Let's talk about the problems Brookfield has. Let's talk about the issues we're facing instead of trying to smear people. If you want to say something negative about me, I'm fine with that. I'm a big boy. I can live with it. But at least make it truthful. Truthful. We have to be able to talk to residents and be able to give them the truth. Sometimes they don't like that truth, right? No one has ever told a resident to sit down and shut up. I never have. There have been 94 meetings of the Board of Selectmen since I first took office. I have missed 2 of those meetings, 2 Board of Selectmen meetings. I think that's a pretty good record. One was for a family emergency, had no choice. The other, I was in an area where there was no Wi-Fi coverage in Texas. You ever been to Texas? In the middle of nowhere? There's no Wi-Fi, could not get on. So let's talk about the real issues in Brookfield. Let's stop, as you say, let's be civil. Let's be polite. Let's work together to make Brookfield better. We've done it. We've rebuilt the 4 corners. We handled the microburst together. We handled COVID together. We did it as a team, as a town. Let's continue that and work together. Thank you very much.
Thanks to the candidates, producer Dan Secor, Brookfield High School, and the Greater Danbury Chamber of Commerce. Please be sure to vote November 7th. I'm Scott Benjamin. Thanks for joining us.